Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Cadet Second Class Aubrey Kurt. It is my privilege to welcome you to the 29th Annual National and Character and Leadership Symposium, and specifically the Enix Heritage Keynote Lecture, featuring a cadet-moderated panel of our Air Force and Space Force senior leaders. Please join me in recognizing our generous sponsor, Lieutenant Colonel Retired Earl A. Enix, Class of 1977, and Mrs. Candy Enix. It is now my privilege to introduce our four senior leader panelists and cadet moderator. Please hold your applause until they are all on stage. General Charles Q. Brown, Jr. is the Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force. As Chief, he serves as a senior uniformed Air Force officer responsible for the organization, training, and equipping of 689,000 active duty, Guard, Reserve, and civilian forces serving the United States and overseas. As a member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the General and other service chiefs function as military advisors to the Secretary of Defense, National Security Council, and the President. General David D. Thompson is the Vice Chief of Space Operations, United States Space Force. As Vice Chief, he is responsible for assisting the Chief of Space Operations in organizing, training, and equipping space forces in the United States and overseas, integrating space policy and guidance, and coordinating space-related activities for the U.S. Space Force and Department of the Air Force. Chief Master Sergeant of the Space Force, Roger A. Towberman, serves at the highest enlisted level of leadership and, as such, provides direction for the enlisted force and represents their interests as appropriate to the American public and to those in all levels of government. He acts as the personal advisor to the Chief of Space Operations and the Secretary of the Air Force on all issues regarding the welfare, readiness, morale, and proper utilization and development of the United States Space Force. Chief Towberman is the first ever Chief Master Sergeant appointed to the highest non-commissioned officer position in the United States Space Force. Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, JoAnne S. Bass, represents the highest enlisted level of leadership and, as such, provides direction for the enlisted force and represents their interests as appropriate to the American public and to those in all levels of government. She serves as the personal advisor to the Chief of Staff and the Secretary of the Air Force on all issues regarding the welfare, readiness, morale, and proper utilization and progress of more than 600,000 total force airmen. Chief Bass is the 19th Chief Master Sergeant appointed to the highest non-commissioned officer position in the United States Air Force. Finally, I am honored to introduce today's moderator for the panel, Cadet First Class Andrew LaRocca from Cadet Squadron 9. Cadet LaRocca and panelists, over to you.
Cool. So, gentlemen, ma'am, thank you for coming out here to Colorado. And so today I'd like to start the discussion with you, General Brown. And so the first question I'd like to ask you is, what was the time that you failed in your career, and what did that teach you about yourself and how you have grown from that experience?
Well, I've actually failed several times, but probably the one that's probably most distinct for me personally was my first operational assignment as an F-16 pilot. So I went to Kunsan, my first assignment, and you go through your mission qualification training, and then you have your check ride. And so I did my check ride, and I failed. And so you might imagine the impression you leave as you come into your new squadron as a brand new lieutenant and failing the check ride. And then I did the recheck. I passed, but I got some additional training because I didn't quite make it all the way. And it was a motivator to me, for me to actually take a hard look at myself. And from that perspective, I think with failure, it's not so much that you fail, it's how you respond to the failure. It's the attitude that you have. And I have a pretty positive attitude about a lot of things. It's just how I was able to bounce back and then use that as a motivator for me, because I always knew after going through my F-16 training, I knew I wanted to go to weapons school. And so it was one of these things that I actually had to work a little bit harder to increase just my skills personally, but also make an impression within the unit that I was still, although I had a setback, I had the drive and the motivation to continue to learn from that failure to eventually succeed.
Yes, sir, and I think that's just important for us cadets, because the idea of failing, and it's okay to fail, just really pushes us to take new opportunities. And so thank you, sir, for sharing that. And now I'd like to turn it over to General Thompson. So, General Thompson, for us as cadets right now, it is hard for us to envision ourselves years in the future in your shoes. And so when you were just starting your prestigious career, what was your vision for yourself, for the future, and how has that evolved over time?
First, thanks for the invitation to join all of you today. And let me start by taking you back to the spring of 1985, Cadet Squadron 7, Cadet First Class D.T. Thompson, Cadet Second Class Rich Clark, somebody you all know today as the superintendent, and Cadet Third Class B.J. Schwado, who just recently retired as a Lieutenant General, outstanding leader and warrior, now leads the Institute for Future Conflict. Suppose somebody had pulled the three of us into a room there in Cadet Squadron 7 and said, showed us, perhaps our bios as they exist today and said, this is where the path leads. We probably would have had three emotions, or three reactions. The first would have been, okay, the squadron is pulling a prank on us. When do you come in and yell, candid camera or whatever, right? That's the first thing. The second is, we'd probably be a little bit concerned that the Air Force and now the Space Force of the future were going to put leadership into our hands. And the third is, we'd be a little concerned for ourselves, thinking, how in the world are we going to get ready? And what I would tell all of you is that you shouldn't be thinking or worrying about anything like that. I will say I was a little bit naive and oblivious when I was young. I didn't really understand. I understood I wanted to be an airman. I understood what I wanted to do in terms of the near future, but I didn't really understand what a future path and a future career might look like. And so what I would encourage all of you to do is, first, understand what you think your goals are, short-term goals, medium-term goals, and long-term goals. Understand what they look like. Think about the milestones and paths that you need to get there. But then don't worry about them too much, other than understanding what they are and knowing the things you ought to be doing on the way. Chart a path, perhaps, but don't expect to follow it exactly. But mostly worry about what you need to do today to do your duties and your jobs to the best of your ability and to prepare yourself for the future. Don't worry about the job you didn't get. Don't worry about your next job. Worry about what you're doing today and what you need to do to prepare yourself for the future. And I assure you, when that day comes, when somebody out there is sitting in this chair or that chair, you'll be ready.
Thank you, sir, for that perspective. And now, Chief Basson and Chief Towberman, this question is both for you. So cadets sometimes struggle to fully comprehend the reality of leading a diverse enlisted force. And so if you could provide the firsties who are about to graduate or hope to graduate with one piece of advice for successful integration with and leading an enlisted force, what would it be?
No, you go first.
All right. So first of all, good morning, folks. Good morning. Man, that sounded weak on a Friday. Good morning, folks. Good morning. Hey, so when it comes to leading, diverse teams, I would offer that, I often think back to what are high-performing teams and how do they become high-performing teams? All of them value the diversity and the strengths and the talents for every single team member that's on it. So as you get ready to go out there and as you're, leading in the capacity that lieutenants might lead, right? Like I would offer, go out there and know your folks and look at the talent and the strengths and the diversity that those folks bring to the team, and then consider those things. When I think of high-performing teams, I think of the Kansas City Chiefs. Thank you, somebody. But, so they value every single one of their team members and the talents that they bring, but they also play their freshmen. So don't be afraid to play your freshmen. Toby.
I do not think of the Kansas City Chiefs. I think that you've got to listen. There was a time when maybe leaders were best served by knowing the answers. I don't think that time is now. I think leaders now ask questions. Knowledge is all around you on that diverse team, and drawing those answers out is probably the most important thing that you can do for the team. And you can't listen to everyone if you don't pay attention to who's not maybe voluntarily providing input and then drawing it out of them. There's always going to be the person happy to give you a thought. If you're really going to make your team effective, you've got to get thoughts from everyone, even the ones who it doesn't come naturally to, the ones that are shy, the ones that feel like maybe what they see or know might not be as valuable. Really work to hear from everyone. A diverse team is great. An inclusive team is what wins. And you're inclusive when you get that input from everyone. And you do that by listening and drawing it out.
Thank you, ma'am and sir, for those answers. And so going back to you, Chief Towberman, so how will you separate the Space Force identity from the Air Force? And what are some of the challenges that you foresee in getting the Space Force out of this younger brother mindset next to the Air Force?
You know, there's never been a 100-meter world record holder that was an oldest sibling. Did you know that?
No.
So I read this once. Something about the development of myelin in toddlers and having to always keep up with the one in front. I think maybe there's some advantages to being the younger sibling sometimes, that you're seeing things and you're trying to keep up and you're trying to impress someone and you're trying. I don't know how well that answers your question. It's just that that's what popped in my head when you called me a younger sibling, which it's literally, at my age, you don't get called younger anything very often, so I appreciate it. As far as our identity, you know, I think again, back to teams. I've been on some pretty elite teams in my career, and the thing that is always present on teams is that every member is there because of what they do, not because of what anybody else does. And so I think we have to focus on those things, right? Like what makes me me? What am I bringing? How do I do this the best? And then that's what makes me valuable to the team as a whole. I don't think there's anything culturally, there's nothing philosophically, there's nothing that our two services want that's different. There's nothing in the way that we treat people or relate or pursue mission success, and none of that. It's all the same. And so there's this constant binding energy culturally, and the nuances or the ways that we do things differently or the color of our name tapes fairly insignificant in the larger context. But you know, it's okay to be proud of those things too. I would never tease Chief Bassett my cool name tapes were better than hers, but if I did and we laughed about it, then it would be okay, right?
I'm sure some of my younger brother is cheering about that statement. Awesome. And moving on to the next question. So, General Thompson, how do you see the Space Force becoming a greater area of focus here at Usafa?
Yeah. We get a lot of questions about a whole lot of things, obviously, related to the Space Force. And one that I get routinely is, do you have a vision for a Space Force Academy, and what does it look like? And my answer is always the same, and that answer is, we have a Space Force Academy. The United States Air Force Academy is the Space Force and the Space Forces Academy. And that's it. And just one of thousands of areas in which the United States Air Force has been our best partner in helping to establish a new service. And from the day the law was signed, probably even before the day the law was signed in December of 2019, this institution and its leadership stood up to say, we are your academy. What do we need to do? In fact, not only did they say, what do we need to do to be your academy, they actually started with, here's a whole host of things we want to do to be your academy. And a little bit like the younger sibling, it was us catching up to the Air Force Academy. And when you look at what they did immediately to adapt to ensuring that the first graduating class after the law was signed include guardians, including how did they very quickly adapt academic programs and training programs, the creation of this program that we're going to start prototyping called the Azimuth Program that gives all cadets of interest the opportunity to see and check and test and understand and help with decisions about what they want to do. The welcoming nature of bringing us on board, bringing our folks on board, simple things like giving us space, giving us support. I would tell you that today the vision we have, the vision that the Air Force Academy leadership has, and the vision that the Air Force has to make us an integral part of this, to continue training air and space leaders together and evolve that into the future is exactly what I would hope to see and hope we can realize in this institution, in this place.
Thank you, sir. And going back to General Brown and Chief Bass, this question's both for you. Can you tell us about a time in your leadership career that you disagreed with someone? And so how did you work through that interaction, and what did you learn from it?
I don't know if I may have one story, but I disagree with people all the time. And it goes back to something I learned when I was at Texas Tech from a friend of mine who said, never throw a brick and hide your hand. And so when I disagree with people, I actually try to engage. And so the story I'd share with you is I was in a position, I was a captain at the time, and there was a shift of responsibility from the position I had to another person on our team. And her office was right next to mine. And once she got the news of the transition of responsibility, she was not happy. So much so I could hear it in my office, how frustrated she was. And so I walked in and talked to her after that and said, we may disagree about how this is playing out, but we still got to work together. And I'm still part of the team. And that actually really worked because we are still friends today. She's long retired, and of course I'm still here. But I do look at the aspect of, disagreement I think is good. Because I really believe iron sharpens iron. And sometimes as a leader, you really want to bring in those that disagree with you. Because if you don't, and you surround yourself with everybody who agrees with you, you're going to have a blind spot. And so I actually look for disagreement. So one of the things I tell the deputy chiefs of staffs and with our MAGCOM commanders, I want to have the meeting after the meeting in the meeting. Too often when we have a meeting, no one says anything because they don't want to upset the chief. And then what happens when they get in the hallway, or we turn off the video teleconference, now everybody has an opinion. I'd rather have those opinions in the meeting. I want to have the disagreements in the meeting because it's going to help us to make a decision. And then the last, maybe a tip I would share with you is, as I think about disagreements, when you're trying to get things done, you're always going to run into roadblocks and friction. And if you really believe in things, just like you have the 5 stages of grief, I have what you call the 5 stages of no. You have to get through all 5 stages. Hell no, no, we'll think about it, not a bad idea, we should be doing it already. So when you're looking through and you're having people disagree with you, you need to get through all 5 stages. Don't give up, particularly if it's something you really believe in your heart of hearts, you think it's the right thing to do. And I've done that throughout my career, gotten through all 5 stages, and you got to be willing to take a little bit of a rest there as well. And realize that sometimes it's not going to work out. Some people are going to disagree with you, but in big scheme of things, as you start to work with other people and you start to bring them onto your team, you can explain why it's important and find areas of common interest, like a Venn diagram. That's why I try to start with a Venn diagram. Where do we agree versus where we disagree? And then I can drag you to where I want you to come with me versus talking about where we disagree. So it's really about talking to each other, not past each other.
All right, so, I'm probably like General Brown where, I have disagreements all the time, and there's always going to be occasions where you disagree, and I think that's a healthy thing. I think what I learned early throughout my career, though, there's so many times that I don't know that I can narrow it to one time. I think what's helped me, though, throughout my career is learning to have a sense of emotional intelligence in that. And as you have disagreements, right, sometimes they'll be in different places. You'll have a disagreement because you're at a meeting with somebody and you disagree with what they say, or you'll have an interpersonal disagreement or whatever it is. I think the main things you really have to be thoughtful of is, like, what's at stake if I don't share my perspective? If I disagree, what's at stake if I don't share my perspective? I would also say, and that takes that emotional intelligence, and to whom am I disagreeing with, right? Like, that matters too. And if I'm going to disagree with my boss, is the best place in a staff meeting? Probably not. And so, you've got to figure out the when and the who, and that all comes with time, that comes with experience. I learned a long time ago, you can say anything that you want to say, you just need the wisdom of how and the when. And so I would just offer a whole lot of emotional intelligence. And then one last pro tip is, like, be a truth teller. We need to surround ourselves by truth tellers. We need to be the truth tellers to our bosses. Again, that wisdom on knowing how and when is critically important.
I'm okay if you disagree in the staff meeting.
Okay, okay. Sir, I'm a gentle disagreeer with you in the staff meeting.
Thank you.
But we have our touch points on the weekend.
We do. We talk every weekend, and we disagree.
I win a few times. Yeah.
No, thank you, Sarah Mann, for sharing those perspectives. And I think for everyone in the room, I think it just speaks to the importance of empathetic leadership and immediately knowing that when you have a different perspective or opinion, not immediately going on the defensive, but rather taking the time to say, okay, what is their perspective, being able to work from there, and also knowing the person well enough to see what's the best way to approach them when having that disagreement. And I'd like to open up to all the other panelists. Are there any other comments from our panelists before we start our cadet Q&A portion?
Let's do it.
Go.
Awesome. So panelists, thank you for your candid discussion. At this time, I would like to present questions from a variety of cadets who participate in a lot of programs across the U.S. Air Force Academy. We respectfully request our senior leaders take turns answering each question.
Hello from the Air Force Parachute Team, the Wings of Blue. I'm C1C Parker Garrison from Cadet Squadron 11. My question for you is, during your time in the military, what has been your largest ethical dilemma? How did you face it? And what did you learn from it?
I can start. Probably one of my largest ethical dilemmas that I dealt with was when I was going to come into command to be the commandant of the U.S. Air Force Weapons School. And I knew that as I walked in that position, there were some inappropriate pictures hanging in different parts of the school that were back in classified areas. And I knew I was going to have to address it. And I knew in some cases it wouldn't be popular. And I think in leadership, if you're in leadership to be popular, you're not leading. And so when I came in, it was between myself and the wing commander that we actually laid out an edict that if you would not hang this in your home at home, or your family, your parents could see it, we're not going to hang it in the weapons school. And we had to go back through and actually basically clear out the weapons school. It was the right thing to do, but it's one of those things you challenge yourself just partly because of you do want to still be respected, and you do want to be somewhat popular as a leader, but it's you got to do what's the right thing to do. And at that point, it was the right thing to do, and that was 2005. So it's been a while, but it's just the aspect of being dignity and respect that you have to think about when you're and how it impacts various career fields, and really particularly for the weapons school, most of the very male dominated at that time, less so today.
I'd say probably my toughest ethical dilemmas revolve around, frankly, firing people. You do it several times throughout your career. I haven't had to do it very many times, and hopefully you won't either, but when people give you cause to fire them, it's pretty easy. But when there's somebody out there for any number of reasons, they're not up to the task, they don't have the qualities you need, they're just not getting the job done. They might be a great American, great human being, trying to do it. The toughest challenges I've always had is to decide that I'm just not going to ignore the problem, or just fight my way through it, or maybe move them to some other job that might help alleviate the situation. Just outright say, look, this isn't working out, this is why. That's often been the toughest ethical dilemma I face, is to say, nope, it's my job to take care of this situation regardless of how much I like the individual or how good they are. It's that kind of thing that I've struggled with the most, is those people that you have to fire because they're just not the right person in the right place at the right time.
So, I'd say at the risk of someone in the Philosophy 101 at the moment downvoting me on Reddit later, I'm going to address this as a pure ethical dilemma, right? Like real ethical dilemma where there's only two choices and they're mutually exclusive. And I'd remind us all that our existence as a military represents that we're in the business of killing people, which we don't think is okay, right? Ethically. And I've had many instances in my career where seconds after I made a radio call, I knew someone was going to die. And they did. And I always myself knew that that was about saving lives and that there was a choice that needed to be made. But I'll tell you, I never scrambled after the mission to find the video so I could high-five everyone over a life that was lost. It's a very serious business that we're in. And the better we wrap our heads around that from a very early age, the more open we are about talking about those hard choices, the better we prepare for those, the easier, right, we'll navigate a real ugly, difficult business that we're in. Don't let it creep up on you. What we do is ugly. It can be ugly. So please, I encourage you all to prepare for that ugliness and wrap your head around it early. I think most of the other kind of, I'd say the difference between a dilemma and a problem, like problems have multiple solutions and always fight for the best solutions. But man, there's some serious, serious things that will happen. And as the future is coming upon us, things that used to be nonsensical, right? Philosophically, like a trolley scenario where the trolley's going to kill 10 people or one person, right? Yeah, but that's never going to happen. Well, until you've got self-driving cars. And now this is really a thing that we've got to think through as human beings. Things that were never going to happen are now going to happen. And you guys get to be part of that future. I will be fishing, hopefully where there are no self-driving cars. But I think the better you prepare yourselves for the reality that those things are real, they're there, they are challenges that must be met, then you don't want to be caught off guard, I guess, would be my best advice.
I have a few examples, but I'll just share one really quickly. Like, as leaders, you have to do things that at times can be really tough, have those tough conversations. We had a scenario when I was a first-time command chief, and Colonel Wink can appreciate this. I think he was there when this happened. But, we had a situation where one of our senior enlisted leaders and a fellow officer had an unprofessional affair and an unprofessional relationship, and it shook our installation. These were very high-performing individuals. So ethically, I was pissed off, like ethically. And this person was going on to do great things. And I had huge respect for the leadership ability for this particular individual, specifically the senior enlisted leader. And I had to have a discussion with him. But at the end of the day, he's still a person who needed to be treated with dignity and respect. But the truth had to be told, and I had to have that tough discussion with that person that, hey, you've lost your ability to lead airmen, and so here is where your career path needs to go, because you still have to hold people accountable, yet figure out ways to treat them with dignity and respect.
Thank you. Moving on to the next question.
Hello from Midfield. I'm C2C Allison Finney, Cadet Squadron 8. My question is, in light of the new developments in hypersonic missiles, how does the Air Force plan on integrating ethics into their responses to this new threat?
I actually prepared to answer that question, so how about if I start?
Go right ahead.
I might have gotten a sneak peek at that question. So hypersonics, I would say a couple of things. First, ethically, not that much different than things we've done in the past. It's a tremendous operational and technical challenge. We need to make sure they're part of our arsenal. We need to develop defenses against them, and we will. That's what we do in the United States Air Force and Space Force and Armed Forces. But it creates some challenges and talks about some others. The first is when you couple hypersonic weapons with nuclear weapons, it's tremendously unstable in a strategic sense, and we have to understand and deal again with a period of strategic instability they might introduce, like we frankly saw as a nation back during the early days of the Cold War. So that's the first thing. The second thing is it really talks about a couple of other ethical dilemmas we have to grapple with, and that is the speed of war, how quickly things are going to happen in the future, and we're going to have machines that make decisions, like Chief Towberman talked about, that kill people. And we can't wait. We cannot let technology drive that, and we can't wait until it's thrust upon us to think through and understand how we have to deal with that ethically. When, how, and should we let machines make decisions to kill people? And we have to deal with it because that's exactly where our adversaries are going.
Moving on to the next question.
Hello from the Air Force Academy Fencing Gym. My name is C3C Orlando Laveras from Squadron 33. And my question is, as you gain rank and reach higher levels of leadership, how do you maintain connection with the airmen you work with and with the airmen that you lead?
By being real and spending time as you engage with airmen. And one of the things I do when I travel, as a matter of fact, I did it this morning. I always try to have a breakfast with airmen. I was over at the prep school this morning and had probably 10 preppies that I had breakfast with. And I shared the story of failing my check ride. I also I washed out of I was doing a dual degree program in architecture and civil engineering when I went into college. I washed out of architecture after 2 years. And just being able to share that with them that I'm no different than them. And when I think about it, as a Chief of Staff of the Air Force, I'm still CQ Brown. I'm still a husband. I'm a dad. Matter of fact, I'm corresponding with my son via text because his AC's gone out. He's down in Tampa. We've been talking through yesterday and into today. And so I have challenges just like anybody else. And by being able to share that, then people see me not just as the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, but as a real person. And the other part of that is, when I have these breakfasts, I do not allow the leadership from that particular organization, base, or wing to be in the room, just so I can build a connection. The other thing I do is I've done this for several years, I'll do brown bag lunches with different demographics because, as you might imagine, there's a lot of layers between me and some of our airmen. And it's a chance for them to kind of just talk to me directly. And as I tell them, I'm taking notes, but I'm not taking names. Because I really want to understand what's going on there and have them be able to give me direct feedback. Again, I think for leaders to be able to show a sense of vulnerability, to show a sense of, hey, you're just like everybody else, you're just older. I think that's an important aspect so you can build those connections with our airmen and our guardians.
I'll just add one more thing. In addition to being real, like the boss said, Chief Towberman spoke about listening. It's about listening to your folks and providing opportunities to do that. I love to just go in and visit places where they aren't expecting me to be there, and I'll just cold pop in and just be real and really ask, hey, what are some of the challenges you guys are going through? And also kind of humanizing myself. I also have surround myself by really good teammates who keep a good ear to the ground on what is going on across our force. And I have a fantastic PA who keeps me attuned to what's going on the social media realm. And so he does a great job of letting me know, what are the thoughts of our airmen and our guardians and our family members and how can we better get after it. And then I'll pop onto social media every now and then. But again, I do have a PA. I'm not on the social media all the time. But typically if there's a clapback, it is me and then he has to clean it up. So, yeah.
So those are great things. I do think being real is just so important, and sharing stories, especially stories of your trials and tribulations, it's very, very powerful. Another kind of pro tip, it's helpful to just have a wide variety of interests and learn new things all the time so that when you meet people, you can connect with them in whatever that is. Especially if you're kind of nerdy like me, just to learn things. If you know that when you meet someone from Ghana, that if you bring up Azuma Nelson as one of the greatest boxers in history, their eyes are going to light up and they're going to get really excited. It's important to know. Or when you meet someone from Connecticut, to remind them that they're officially known as nutmeggers. Like, that's just fun, right? And so you can connect with people because you know things and you're interested in a wide variety of things. The more things you can dabble in, the more likely you are to have a real human connection with a wide variety of people. So I just encourage you all to constantly be learning new things and taking on new interests and trying, learning, just all the time.
very well.
Awesome. Moving on to the next question.
Hello from the Cadet Gymnasium. My name is C2C Amber Bull from Cadet Squadron 10. My question is, in a resource-constrained environment, if you had $1 more to spend, where would you spend it and why?
I need more than just $1.
So many places.
One of the areas I think I would actually put money towards is some of our foundational areas, because we tend to focus on platforms and weapons, and when I think about foundational, it's some of our airmen programs and how we take care of airmen and families. And one of the things that you see in some of our budgets, one of that comes forward to how we take care of the service members and the troops is by pay raises, which is nice to get a pay raise, but that money actually goes in people's pockets versus how do we look at some programs. So I almost want to take some of that and direct it towards some of the programs that would be enduring for the airmen that come to various bases around our Air Force. Because in some cases we don't have enough money for those programs as well. And because it's really about the quality of life. And that quality of life is not only, what we do where you work, but it's how we take care of you when you're not working. How we take care of your families, or give you things to do in your free time. That to me is an important aspect, and that's an area I think we can focus more on. And if I had more money, I'd put it towards that. And then at the same time, what I'd also do, we have a lot of programs that are kind of half funded. I would take some, they were on life support, I would take them off life support and just kill them. And then take that money and apply it to other areas. And so we have to make tough choices, and I'm not afraid to make a decision. And part of it is making some of these decisions, which will make some people unhappy. But I'm okay with that too. Because if we don't do that, what we'll do is we'll all walk around complaining about what we're not doing. It's how do we focus our efforts to ensure that we're doing the things to allow all of our airmen and families to reach their full potential, but at the same time provide them the capability that our nation needs to be able to defend our national interests.
Because the boss would fund the airmen stuff, I'd put my money somewhere else. I appreciate that for certain. And I don't know that the cadets can appreciate this, but you will when you get into the Air Force. If I could probably put my money into anything, it would be into our IT platforms and our cyber stuff. Like all of us just want to do our job. And so, I actually joke with the Space Force sometimes. And when I go out and I talk to our airmen, I'm like, man, I wish I was the Space Force sometimes. Because if we had the number of airmen as y'all do Guardians, I would tell all the Guardians, sorry, you're not going to get paid for 3 or 4 months because we're not taking mil PDS with us, right? Like we would start from scratch. And the challenge is we have 685 total force airmen. We don't have the luxury to just be able to start from scratch with IT systems from scratch. And so we have to build where we are, but we have a CIO who is passionate about it and it has a strong strategy. But I would put all our money in our IT because we just want to do our jobs.
For the record, I don't think we're considering any courses of action that will not pay someone for 3 months.
True, but I will say we took mil PDS with us, and there were a couple people who didn't get paid for 3 or 4 months. This is not a good thing. If I had $1 more to spend, and thank goodness, man, they were, well, let's just say, the things you never dreamed you'd have to help people with in a career. So I'd spend the next dollar on space superiority, and here's why. And it's a reflection of where we are with threats, where we are in the American way of war, and frankly, the reason the Space Force was created. Space capabilities are so deeply embedded in the Joint Force and Joint Force capabilities in the way we fight and win the nation's wars today. That's a good thing. It's exactly what our number one priority is and what we have to worry about most. But there are 2 things associated with that. The first is our adversaries have been watching and they understand and they plan to take that away from us in conflict. The second is, the other part of watching it is they've been mimicking us and doing exactly the same thing we've been doing to put our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines at risk. And so in order to fill our first priority, providing capabilities to those soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and protecting them from capabilities that others may bring from space, our most important need and missions today are protecting and defending what we have and denying the use of space to adversaries so that we can do those missions for soldiers, sailors, airmen.
I get the last. I'm the fourth of the dollars. I feel all the good ideas have been taken. But yeah, people and systems and warfighting capabilities. Never forget the most decisive military advantage in history is the American service member, the human being. You are greater than has ever been, and we owe you that sort of commitment in a lot of ways. So I think I really agree fundamentally with General Brown. I think maybe if I had to kind of go to a specific, I would say the way that I would invest in better in the way that we manage that human capital, the way that we find talent and the way that we retain, develop talent. We've got to be able to get this right. We've got to maintain that advantage. There's no, we will never equipment our way out of not having the right people. We've got to have maintain the best human beings on the planet. And so I think I would just, however that investment is with the last of the $4 we got, I think it'll be money well spent as long as we're spending on human beings.
Thank you, everyone, for your answers on that. Moving on to the next question.
Hello, I'm here with Usafa Falconry, and my name is C2C Conrad Reitz. With me here I have Nova. She is our falconry mascot here at the Academy. And my question for you is, what are the Air Force's future plans to help increase environmental sustainability as we continue to produce new things like jets and weapons?
Sustainability. There's several areas that we're looking at, and one of that is, you think about the Department of Defense and the United States Air Force, we are probably the worst because of fossil fuels and how much we burn. And so it's really looking at new engine technology, and and that's a way to actually, one, to increase range, but also increase fuel efficiency, and then be thinking about how we be mindful of the climate. The other is, matter of fact, we're getting ready for Air Force Association next week, and we have a thing called Spark Tank, and so I'd encourage you to watch next week. But one of them is, how do you actually create water out of thin air? So you don't have to bring a bunch of water and burn a bunch of fuel to get it there, but you're able to do it and just pull it out of the environment. And so that's an aspect of thinking differently. And then the other thing that we're doing particularly it's up at Allison, is a small nuclear kind of reactor to help generate power. So you're not burning a bunch of diesel fuel to do that, and how you might use that when you're think about agile combat employment and moving forward. So those are small steps, but I also say the other part where the Department of Defense is leaning to is, how do we get to off of gas-powered vehicles to more electric-powered vehicles. We really got to think about that, because that's exactly where technology and most of our auto manufacturers is going. We'll be kind of like the dinosaur, still working off of fossil fuels, and we've got to start making that shift. And that's another, and that's actually being directed to all the services, and so that's another area that the Air Force is working on. It's not only the vehicles themselves, but the infrastructure. So you have charging stations on the bases. So we got to think about all these things that have to come together to make that happen.
So on the Space Force side, a lot of our focus is really on the installations, and this is another area of partnership with the Air Force. The Air Force partners with us to operate our bases for us. But the vast majority, not all, but the vast majority of space missions are conducted from home station, satellite control centers that control those constellations. And so the balance between ensuring that you have the resources and the power and the connectivity that you need to assure the mission, up to and including wartime, but still consider the environmental factors and where we need to go in that regard, is a place that we're partnering with the Air Force, and we have the opportunity to lead and grow and evolve. And the second piece of that is, one of the Space Force missions is to provide weather and meteorological support to the joint force and frankly to civil society. So it's also understanding the climatology and how weather patterns are changing and what that means that we help contribute in that regard as well.
Moving on to the last question.
Hello from the Cadet Fieldhouse. I'm C4C Maeve Roscoe from Cadet Squadron 9. And my question to you is, as senior leaders, what impact are you hoping to have on the future leaders of the Air and Space Force?
You know, I'll start.
You start.
You know,
You guys go first.
I'll be honest. I think sometimes we use this leadership word. Every day, I just hope to make every person I meet's life a little better. I mean, it really is the little things that will matter the most. And so I think if you spend your life and you value yourself by the change that you make in the world, by the change that you make in the lives of other human beings, that developing leaders will sort of happen as a natural extension of you investing in every person that you meet and in us at the top doing what we can to build an ecosystem as an institution where every human being can find the best version of themselves wearing this uniform. So I think that's probably what I would say to answer or effectively avoid the question.
I think the thing I think about, and the reason why I still serve is I want to make a difference. You want to contribute. And also think about the aspect when you look at our organizational charts that, you sit as a Chief of Staff of the Air Force, you sit at the kind of the top of the chart. And you almost want to flip it around. And I really think about that, is that, our Air Force and all our airmen, they don't work for me. I work for them. My job is to make their job easier, to make their lives better. And I think about that as if I can't, if nobody else can. And so it's one of those that I was told, I was mentored, when you get to this level as a general officer, that you need to use your rank for good. And how you use that rank to have an influence to drive things, to make it better for our airmen, and to provide them the opportunity. And that's really, I think for any one of us, we just want the opportunity. And what I want to do is actually, as a chief, is to provide, make a difference by providing opportunities for all that want to serve, to allow them and their families to reach their full potential. And I think that's what any one of the cadets here want to be able to do at the Air Force Academy. I think any one of us in uniform, that's what we want to be able to do. And I think I have an opportunity to do that by, if you remember Action Order B on bureaucracy, I like cutting down bureaucracy. I like breaking down barriers and being able to take things and sometimes it's just a stroke of a pen. I just need to know about it so I can actually sign it and make the change. And that's the things I want to be able to do. And I'm willing to take those risks. And we got to be willing to take risks. As I say, it's hard to be innovative and risk averse at the same time. We've got to be able to take some risk in certain areas, but learn as we have setbacks and move forward. So those are the things I try to do, and it's really, again, it boils down just to make a difference.
At this time, I would like to open the floor for questions. Our in-person attendees can ask questions at the microphones positioned in the audience.
Wow. Good.
Go ahead.
Yes, good morning. My name is Darrell Whitcomb, class of 69, 7th Squadron. We're holding this symposium amidst the specter of the horrific events in the Ukraine, and I would like to ask our two chiefs, our senior officers here, if there's anything at this point that you could share with us. These events could affect everybody in this room, everybody in this nation. Is there anything at this point that you've seen that you can share with us about what's going on over there? Thank you.
Well, if I understand the question, it's about Ukraine, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
The Ukrainian, the Russian invasion and everything.
Right. Well, here's what I'll tell you, that what I can share with you is that how NATO, U.S. with our allies and partners have all come together to, one, look at how we deter, and the aspect of being able to try to deter what was going to happen, which is already happening, but how to put and get solidarity, I would say, within the international community. I will tell you, this is one area that we actually took information and really used information to, I wouldn't say to our advantage, but do it better than we've done it in the past. I think we've had a pretty good understanding of Putin's playbook, and we laid it out publicly to gain some solidarity in the international community. Matter of fact, the other night when things started to kick off, I was watching on CNN all the talks from different nations from the UN condemning Russia for what they were doing. It's really how our allies and partners are all coming together to bolster, because the goal is not to get into a conflict with Russia. At the same time, not let the solidarity of NATO fall apart. And I think what's happened here is it's made NATO even stronger than it has been previous to this particular event, which is backfiring for Putin. And that's what I'd kind of share with you from a big picture standpoint.
And I don't really have much to add specifically in that regard, but what I would say is, on one hand, I think it really does go back to where we were in the past in terms of peer competitors and competition in the world. And in fact, there are things out there that the United States can't do alone, and frankly, can't necessarily always affect directly. We have to learn again how to operate in that world. But I would tell you what's changed this time is the world is increasingly transparent, and I think what we've seen perhaps for the first time in a large conflict like this, there's a lot of information out there available all over the world, and it allows people to understand and draw their own conclusions. And I think so far, our friends and our allies and those that are opposed to what Putin are doing seem to be using effectively the power of information and understanding that while Putin is saying one thing, there's clear information that anybody can look at and see and understand it's different. And I think understanding that that's the world we all have to operate and deal in, understand it, and understand how to use it effectively is something I hope we're seeing evolve in this situation.
Last question, please.
Kayla Mader from the University of Missouri. Go Chiefs. My question for you all is, as cadets, I feel like we get a lot of examples of good leadership and great leadership, but we can't deny that in the profession of arms there is a potential for poor leadership. And I was wondering if you could provide some examples of witnessing poor leadership firsthand and how you had the courage to stand up and do the right thing.
So I'll say that I've learned from every leader that I've had, and, in fact, I probably have learned more from some of my not so good leaders, right? Because you learn what not to do. And that's a great example. And so, that's just life, whether you're in the profession of arms, serving in the military, or if you're working for Google or, whoever you're working for, you're going to have all diverse kinds of leaders with different thoughts and whatever. Learn from every single one of them and then define your own path.
So, in fact, Chief Bass said it exactly right. When I mentor folks, I tell them, in fact, oftentimes it's easier to learn from bad leaders than it is from good leaders. And so while I wouldn't give you a specific example, you do need to understand and learn what bad leadership is, why, and why you should not do it. But the other thing I would encourage you on here is, especially all of you cadets, you're in kind of a safe zone to learn and understand and develop who you are as a leader. The fear of trying to learn too much from good leaders is you think you have to act like them and do what they do. Good leadership is really understanding who you are, what works for you in terms of leadership, developing that more, and understanding the weaknesses that you have and what you need to do to improve them. So what I would encourage all of you cadets to do, and something I was probably too naive and oblivious to understand at the time, this is a tremendous opportunity and pretty much a risk-free opportunity to learn and to try and to practice various types of leadership here and learn and understand what your style is and how you can be an effective leader going forward. Understand what bad leaders do, understand what good leaders do, but ultimately try and assess whether those things work for you.
I guess what I add to that is that for all of us as leaders, we all have aspects of bad leadership, just about to what level. I would say even for myself, there's probably some things that where I have some blind spots, how I lead. I like to say when you're in leadership, your dinner table conversation at somebody's house every night, either something you did good or something they didn't like. You need to understand that, and you need to kind of self-assess and actually get feedback. And the challenge you might think, particularly at this level, is we don't get a lot of feedback. It's up on social media. Again, don't throw a brick and hide your hand. People do that on social media. I'd rather them come talk to me directly and be able to have that feedback. And so, for example, one of the things I do when I do feedback for every direct report I have. I do it in 3 parts. I talk to them about their job performance. I talk to them about their career. Then I ask them to provide me feedback. And it's helpful because sometimes people will tell me things. And I go, sometimes I know about it and sometimes I don't. But I think it's important that we all look at and we learn from all aspects of leadership and put all that in your toolkit, just realizing you're going to lead a diverse group of individuals. And every step of your leadership does not resonate at the same level across the board. And so you've got to balance it. But again, going back to John Thompson's point, you got to be you. And if you're not you, people will see right through your leadership and they won't follow you.
From a followership perspective, the one last thing that I would add to what everyone else has said, besides it just reminds me to read Virginia Woolf. I just think it's good. But be you. I would say from a followership perspective, do not assume, because I think we would all agree, in my experience, the likelihood is, the overwhelming likelihood is that leader is not trying to be a bad leader. And when we as a follower assume this person isn't good because they don't want to be good, or they don't like me, whatever, that doesn't make our situation any better. What makes the situation better is to give some benefit of the doubt and to try to work through what can I work on, assuming that this person's trying to get this right and they're failing. How do I work within that? I just think it's a healthier way to look at it. It's not the way, it took me a long time to figure that out. I would rage against, somebody that I didn't think was doing a good job. And to be perfectly honest with you, I probably have taken years off of my life with that strategy. So I really think you're better off to go, okay, what's most likely here is they're innocently underachieving. So how can I be helpful? How can I be helpful to this team and to myself and to that leader so that we move forward?
Senior leaders, thank you so much for your time and perspectives, which have enriched our review of ethics and respect for human dignity. On behalf of our 2022 NCLS participants, the cadet wing, and the faculty and staff of the Air Force Academy, we would like to present you with a small token of our appreciation. This concludes our session. We appreciate audience feedback at our testimonial booth on the south side of the Honor Hall foyer. Also, at the end of your NCLS experience, we invite you to take the cumulative survey on the event app or via the link sent in email after NCLS closes. Thank you and have a great NCLS day.